So joining us now to discuss the reaction to President Trump's speech, we've got Anthony Pompliano. He's Professional Capital Management's CEO. Anthony, it's great to speak with you here. So obviously former President Trump really trying to lean in with these crypto supporters. Do you buy it? Do you think that when he gets into office, he's going to be enacting all of the policies that he has purported over the weekend if he does, in fact, win in November?
Yeah, I think there's two key components to this, right? The first is President Trump seems to have gone through a very similar trajectory to most Bitcoiners. Is when you first hear about it, you don't believe it. Then you kind of do some work on it. Eventually, you become convinced of the value, and then you start telling other people about it. And so that seems to be, a very similar trajectory to many, many people that I know in the industry. The second thing is that I do think you can look at who is around him, right? If you look at his sons, if you look at some of the advisors that he has, if you look at even folks that we know have been talking to him about Bitcoin, specifically somebody like Vivek, et cetera. I do think that it is highly likely he is much more sympathetic than he was previously. Now, the question is, what does that mean? What will he actually do? And, unfortunately for all candidates, whether it is Trump, if it's, Harris running against him, if it's RFK, et cetera, we don't know what they're going to do until they're in office. And so the best thing that we have to go on is what they say. And, many people will rail against political candidates and say, they just make these empty promises, they don't fulfill them. But right now, we can only judge based on, what actually is being told to us. And so, so far, he said all the right things. But, unfortunately, we don't know what any candidate will do until they're actually the president.
Anthony, good to see you. If President Trump does win the White House, day one, he cans SEC Chair Gary Gensler. How bullish is that for crypto?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously, the regulatory environment has not been as kind of conducive to the industry as I think many people in the industry want it to be. With that said, I do think that we built a $3+ trillion industry, even with a regulatory environment that maybe wasn't, as friendly as people desire. And so regulation definitely matters. Regulation being, kind of more friendly, more clear, et cetera, would be helpful. But I think that the regulatory conversation is only one component of a much bigger story here, which is, kind of the truth wins out. And what we've watched globally is that this technology is something that people want. These assets are something that people want. And as you can see in kind of the price, people are going to continue to buy them regardless of what the United States regulatory policy is. And so from an industry standpoint, yes, crypto and Bitcoin will continue to be successful, without kind of a friendly regulatory body. But in the American viewpoint, yes, if we want this built here, then we do need to have some sort of friendly regulatory bodies. And it sounds like, multiple political candidates are promising that.
Well, I want to talk about the success of Bitcoin that you are mentioning here, Anthony. Let's take a look at the 5-year chart of this digital asset here. Less than 2 years ago, Bitcoin was under $16,000. That's a decline of over 75% from its current levels. I get it. We're going to blame it on FTX, whatever. But how do you have so much confidence in this asset class continuing to grow, by Michael Saylor's point of view, by 20% every single year, given that, again, just 2 years ago, it had this huge crash?
Yeah, well, I think if you go back to kind of 2022, 2023, yes, some of it was definitely FTX, but Bitcoin was already down pretty substantially off of its highs before the FTX collapse occurred. And a lot of that was just interest rates. And the Fed said that they were going to destroy demand. They did a fantastic job of destroying investor demand in many assets, not just Bitcoin. And so it wasn't just one thing. I think it was kind of a confluence of events that drove the price down. But really, what you have to believe to understand that Bitcoin has a very high probability of continuing to go up over many years to come is that the US dollar structurally is going to be debased. If you go back and you look at, Republicans or Democrats, whoever is in office, they continue to increase the national debt. Today, the national debt hit $35 trillion, and there are no signs of slowing down. And so if they're going to continue to devalue the currency, then anything priced in that currency will go up. It's why the stock market continues to go up at around 8 to 9%. Now, if Bitcoin continues to go up at 20% a year, that actually would be very slow. That would be a significant slowdown in the current kind of price appreciation. Over the last 5 years, Bitcoin has actually been going up at closer to 45 to 50% on an annualized rate basis. And so seeing a 20% annualized rate over the next, call it 20 years, is not really that kind of crazy when you see just the devaluation of the dollar. You continue to see a fixed supply asset that millions and millions of people around the world are waking up to every month and saying, hey, I want this thing. And it's not just the US dollar that's being debased. It's also all of the fiat currencies around the world. Anyone who lives in a fiat fiat currency regime is saying to themselves, maybe I should get a little bit of Bitcoin in case it catches on.
We've heard some chatter, Anthony, that Vice President Harris and her team may be looking to reset the relationship with the cryptocurrency community. If they were to make that outreach, is that something that the community will trust? Will they embrace a potential President Harris?
Yeah, look, as in any industry, I think you're going to get a variety of reactions, right? There's going to be people who say, hey, I don't want kind of have a conversation with you. I think you'll have plenty of people who say, well, I would love to have a conversation with you. That's how, what makes up industries, especially industries with hundreds of millions of people in it. Now, what I do think is that we need Bitcoin to be a bipartisan asset. We don't want it to only be accepted by one side of kind of the political spectrum. And so that outreach or that reset, I think would be a welcomed thing by many people in the industry. Now, with that said, again, just as I said with President Trump and kind of words versus action, the same thing here is if you want to reset relationships, I think there's a lot of people who are saying to themselves, okay, well, you're in power right now. What are you going to do, right? There are a couple of months before the election. Show us what that reset looks like rather than just tell us what it is. And, there's people calling for all kinds of different maybe milestones or kind of things that would, really prove that there is this reset and they're serious about it. But I think just action over words is really what's going to end up convincing people that either side of the political aisle is serious about this asset class, this industry, and a lot of these campaign promises.